here to talk about keeping your database and the server that it runs on healthy. The main thing is to start with a good configuration. If you start with a good configuration, then you can keep it healthy. And here at White Star, we have hundreds and hundreds of systems that we've been monitoring for years. We collect billions, literally billions with a B, of data points every day and evaluate those for server performance. And what that does is give us some really deep insight into what kinds of configuration options are really good and which ones are not so good. So if you're having a not so good time, we probably have an idea why that is. This is actually a very good production server, even though it's in parts on the table. And this actually does represent many of the highlights of a good server.
Let me take a picture.
It's a long time ago. This really was production. I walked in, sat down, and talked to Guido a little bit here, and yeah, that actually was a production server running at that point. Yes, Gus?
I think it's a fake.
No, it's not a fake.
No, the reason I say that is there's no dirt in it.
What's my office?
Fans.
It was brand new.
The fans have blown all the dirt away.
Okay, so we're going to talk about some of the best practices for configuring a database server for OpenEdge. So we're not going to talk about Oracle, we're not going to talk about SQL Server, we're not going to talk about your Exchange server or any of those kinds of things. This is an OpenEdge database server. If your ultimate goal is performance, this is how you want to configure your server. If you have some other goal, like maybe you want to save money, this is probably not necessarily the way you want to go. But if performance is where you're at, then we're going to talk about more is not always better. Virtualization does in fact have a cost. It's not free. There's no such thing as a high performance SAN. If anybody's ever bought into that, you should know better. Keep your friends closer, your clients closer. That's about client server performance. And after imaging, I hate to say it, but I still have to say this in 2023, after imaging is not optional. If you're not running after imaging, you're in trouble. Okay, so more is not always better, especially when it comes to a database server. There's a tendency when you're out there buying hardware and buying a database server, you have a performance problem, to try to treat that problem by buying more cores. More cores is probably not going to help you because you're probably not constrained by cores in the first place. Even if it seems like you might be, you're probably not. Because the OpenEdge database engine is multi-threaded. But in order to protect shared memory and to ensure the synchronization occurs correctly, the server uses something called a latch or a mutex lock, which is a single-threaded bottleneck on operations against shared memory. And that makes a choke point, kind of like this traffic circle here where everybody's all coming together trying to get at the same resource. And you can't fix that by having more cores. You can fix it by having faster cores. And fewer of them is usually good. So less traffic, moving faster, is going to be more efficient than a whole lot of traffic moving very slowly.
So they should raise their speed limit?
Yes, there's a speed limit. It should be raised.
So is Numa still something that you know as a challenge?
We will discuss Numa in a moment.
Thank you.
In manufacturing, there's a trade-off. So when Intel or AMD or ARM or somebody is putting together a new chip, they make a trade-off for the core speed versus the number of cores that they can put on that chip. The more cores you have, the slower they're going to run. So if you go out and buy a 24-core CPU, it's going to be slower than an 8-core CPU from the same family and the same generation of those chips. So generally speaking, when you look at the product offerings, you'll see that relationship. The total number of cores is related to the frequency that you can run the chip at. And the more cores, the slower that chip is going to be. So you generally want the smaller number of cores running at a faster speed. You'll get better throughput that way. Here's where we talk about Numa. This is for you. You can't fix the problem with Numa. Now, your manufacturers want to sell you Numa because that costs more money, obviously, so they make a better commission, they have better results from their sales efforts that way. But that doesn't help you with your database because you're spreading the load wider, so you have more lanes of traffic, and worse yet, you have more stoplights. And what happens is when you are spreading that load across all those CPUs, it has to coordinate. It has to make far memory accesses. So instead of accessing memory on the same core, it now has to go over the bus and out through the neighborhood and then back onto another bus. It's almost like a SAN. And that all takes time. So here we have some testing that we did last year, looking at the number of records per second that you can read in various configurations. So the top line is basically one Numa node. So that's just one node. The other three nodes are turned off, and we get the best throughput. We get about 3 million reads per second with just one node. So disable the other cores. As soon as you cross over to that very first CPU on the second node, performance plummets. Drops right off a cliff. You get half the performance as soon as you start using any core on any other node. And no matter how you mix them up, no matter what you do in Numa control, no matter what you do trying to spread things across the other cores, you only get half the performance when you're using more than one node. When you look at the NMON data over here, you see that there's a boatload of system time. That's coordination going on between the nodes. And this is with all of them enabled. This is with only one enabled. So basically what happened here was we got twice the performance at a small fraction of the total CPU utilization. So by turning off 24 cores, we doubled performance.
I bet you were popular.
The accountant hasn't heard about this yet. But the users are really happy.